Today's conversation is sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners. If you're an accredited investor and you want to know about how we're helping other accredited investors keep more of their income, go to firstgencp.com/going long.
We're checking on the property, paying visits to the property. We often have a person that lives in that area to go by and make sure things are going okay, and managing the project manager. It's such a team sport, and there's so many people involved. It doesn't matter where you and I are.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels, the #1 podcast for long-distance real asset investing.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. And yes, I'm your host, Billy Keels, and I am super excited about welcoming you back to another amazing conversation. Today, we're literally going to go from continent to continent. You'll understand more about why I'm telling you that in just a couple seconds. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you for continuing to download the episodes, to share them with your family, with your friends, to talk about things. And because of these continued downloads and the fact that you're sharing, we continue to move up the charts together. And also, if you've not had a chance, you can already see that we're starting to change things. We're adapting. We're making it exactly what you're looking for and asking for. If you want to find out more about what we're doing, make sure that you write an honest written review as well as a rating. And if you haven't done that, just take a couple seconds. We even have a nice little video here. You can click the link and it'll show you exactly how to do that on the Apple Podcast platform. So let's continue to move up the charts together. And thank you for doing that. And also, listen, there is a new home, and yes, you know where it is. If you want to see the over 230 episodes by the time you're listening to this, all you need to do is go to firstgencp.com/podcasts. And you can find every single episode of the Going Long podcast here with Billy Keels, and it's going to be absolutely awesome. So listen, once again, firstgencp.com/podcasts, and you can find every single podcast. As for today's conversation, this is really, really cool. So today's conversation, I get a chance to share with you a conversation that happens between the United States. I'm talking about the United States because we're all interested in the United States in terms of investing. But one person is in Costa Rica and the other person is in España. Guess who the person is in Spain? That's me, yours truly. But today's conversation is going to be really, really awesome, especially if you're someone who is a high-paid professional. Let's say that you're in the medical sales device area, or you're in IT sales, or maybe you're a doctor, a lawyer. A lot of you are. Today's conversation you're really, really going to love, because you're going to find out what it means to pick up from one place that you live, very comfortable settings, moving to another place, hint, hint, sound like something I've done. And you're going to understand exactly what it takes to go step by step and understand the power of having hard assets in your portfolio, those types that pay you cash on a frequent basis. So today, you're really going to enjoy today's conversation with Becca Hint, and we're going to get to that just after this. Are you a busy, high-paid professional? Someone that in the previous 2 years has earned $200,000 and is expected to earn $200,000 this year? Or maybe if you filed jointly, previously you've earned $300,000 the previous 2 years and you're also expected to do that this year. Or maybe if not, either individually or jointly, you have $1 million in net worth, not including your primary residence. If you meet any of these criteria, then you're someone that the IRS considers to be an accredited investor. That probably means you're someone like an enterprise software sales executive. You may be an executive in a major corporation. You may be a doctor. You may be a lawyer, maybe a high-paid consultant. You may even work for a major sports franchise. The thing I know you have in common is that you continue to do the hard work. Like you're doing 100% of the work and you're only bringing home 50% of the reward because you continue to get crushed by your income taxes. If you are tired of this situation and you're looking for a new solution, then go to firstgencp.com/going long. When you get there, that's going to help you to start the journey so that you can begin to take back control of your taxes, take control of your time. And then also that means you're going to be able to spend more of the time that you want with the people that you love the most. And that is the way that you're going to get the personal freedom that you're looking for. So if you're looking to take back control, go ahead and go to firstgencp.com/going long and see how we can help you today. So if you want to know how to continue to scale your real asset investing portfolio and do that with the form of strategic partnerships, all while living outside of the country, maybe even specifically in Latin America, then guess what? Today's the conversation that you're going to want to listen to until the very last word. You know why? Because today's guest check this out. Did some undergrad study in business administration as well as business management. Spent 15 years in the medical device and biotech sales space. Well, we've got a lot of IT sales professionals here, so want to hear more about this. Also, our guest today fell in love with passive income and tax benefits of multifamily real estate. And you know what? She's also, there you go. I kind of surprised it a little bit. I gave a little bit of the surprise. She spent the last 2 decades investing in multifamily, as well as doing that through strategic partnerships. And she is the founder of Hint Investments. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation, Becca Hint. Becca, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Billy. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm an avid listener of your show, as many travelers and investors are. It's quite an honor. Thanks so much.
I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I kind of gave a little bit of who you were, and I try to keep it like super neutral and stuff like that. But hey, here you go. I gave it away. But I'm not giving away the biggest part of the secret. You're going to tell that. But here's the thing, Becca, I really would like for the Going Long family to get to know you. But before that, we kind of have to ask you a couple questions, if you don't mind.
You bet.
All right. First question is, help us understand, where is it that you live in the world?
Okay. I live in Nosara, Costa Rica. It's in the Guanacaste province. We live in a boutique and surf and yoga hub on the Pacific side. And it's a blue zone of the world. Are you familiar with blue zones, Billy?
Tell us what a blue zone is.
Oh, okay. So there's 6 of them in the world. Costa Rica is one of them. Okinawa, Japan is another one. Sardinia, Sicily is another one. Lots of things on the internet and books about blue zones. Essentially, it's a place where there's the largest concentration of centenarians in the world. These are people that live to 100 years old and beyond in very good health. Mm-hmm. And they attribute that to certain characteristics of their lifestyle, and it's food, exercise, family, and a number of other things.
Fantastic. So you're in a wonderful place. I've actually been to Guanacaste, the Guanacaste area in Costa Rica, or Costa Rica, depending on who you're speaking to. And you know what? I actually used to live in Sardinia, in Cagliari, which was many moons ago. And we can talk about that later on after the conversation, because not the entire Going Long family wants to hear about that, but that's a whole different story. Okay. So that's cool. So we understand that you are in Costa Rica, which is fantastic. And then also help us understand, Becca, what's the most positive thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours?
Okay. Well, yesterday was 4th of July in the States. So, it's nice being overseas because you can find your expat friends and family and still celebrate, things that are comfortable back home, but with a tropical twist. So we gathered up all the 12-year-old boys of my friends and all of my son and all the friends of my 11-year-old. And we went out to a place called Bodhi Surf, which is kind of a volleyball restaurant, pool in the midst of the jungle, and had our barbecue and American food.
Very cool. It reminds me of one of the most recent scenes in a Top Gun movie that we just saw with my sons. But we did a family night here. But very, very cool. So I appreciate you sharing that. So getting together and being able to celebrate the holidays and doing that with family and friends is always fun. And whenever there's a nice barbecue and a lot of laughs, well, that always helps as well. So I appreciate you sharing that with us, Becca. And you know what? I have to admit something that I usually don't tell people in the very beginning, because if not, you may not even show up here on the podcast. But I am someone who tends to hold, I set the bar very, very high. Sometimes I set it so high that I put these very impossible tasks in front of myself and try to accomplish them. Sometimes it's actually silly, the things that I do. Like just to give you a very concrete example, I tried to tell your entire backstory of your life in 2.5 seconds. Like, that's impossible, right? But I still try to do that. So anyway, so it's just part of this recovering perfectionist nature that I have. But hopefully, number one, you will forgive me for trying to do something so outlandish. But secondly, that you will also help me and also help the Going Long family as a result, because they're going to get a chance to know more about your backstory. So if you could help me by telling your backstory in your own words, and you have a lot more than 2.5 seconds, so take the time that you need. You'll be absolutely fine. And then one other little favor that I do want to ask you. While you're telling us your backstory, Becca, could you also make sure that you tell us about some of the major decisions that you've made to get to this point in your journey? And I'm going to guess that you've probably made 1 or 2 major decisions to get to Costa Rica. And And then from there, we'll see where you and I take the conversation.
That sounds great. That
right.
sounds great. And I'm sorry I can't mute all the tropical birds in the background for your audience.
These are first world problems. These are first world problems, Becca. I think we'll get okay. Just want to make sure that no one falls asleep because they're going to be so cool, like soothed and calming. But go right ahead.
And if you watch Billy on YouTube, no virtual background here, folks. With any luck, we'll see some howler monkeys in the background eating some really mangoes.
Cool. That would be awesome.
Oh, so, well, I think you could probably summarize a bit better than me, but I'll go ahead and give it a shot. So my husband and I were medical device reps from the San Francisco Bay Area. We worked for a Fortune 500 company selling their CT and MRI scanners, the big radiology diagnostic machines. While it was a great job, good income, great benefits, company car, cell phone, territory in Hawaii, it was not passive, Billy. I mean, the farthest from passive. One could say, sales jobs are actually hyperactive jobs because the moment you stop working, the moment that money stops coming in. So it's been a mental journey for passive income. And I'll tell you about a bit of that journey as we go. But as far as the move here, perhaps we start out there. It was the midst of the COVID pandemic, and the schools were shut down in California. The kids were on Zoom calls. The ultimate straw that broke the camel's back for me as I walked in, see my son on a Zoom call, and the boys, these rascally boys, had taken pictures of themselves and put it as their background. And then they just went off and played games, and the teacher knew no other. I said, okay, this is it. We've got to get got smart. But you can imagine the disappointment as a parent.
Yes, I can.
It's just avid travelers. And I was a college backpacker and, traveled around the world, on a 1-year ticket, seeing Mongolia and China and Russia and all through Europe. I've always had this kind of intrinsic wanderlust. So I said to my husband, this is crazy. We got to get out of this place. Have you ever looked at how much it costs per day to live in this expensive house in the Bay Area with the gardener, with the pool, with the, crazy electricity bills? And if we took that money, and have you realized how much better we could live somewhere else and leave all this nonsense behind? And then the quest began. So in August, we just decided to leave it all behind. We quit the jobs. We rented out the way too big of a house in California, and we stitched together our life on other passive income investments that we were holding and continue to acquire. And we made it here to Costa Rica, and our life is 80% supported by passive income.
Wow.
In the tropics, in a blue zone.
You know what? I think that was actually kind of probably a lot of music to many people's ears. And so, it's so as I mentioned to you before, when I think about, so you have like the Hawaiian territory that you're covering. Were you and your husband both covering the same territory geographically? No. Okay. One of the two of you was covering
at one
Hawaii,
point
right?
we were, but
okay,
towards
at
the
one
end,
point.
no.
Okay. Well, but one way or the other. So you had this opportunity to travel. Some people could see that as something that's absolutely fantastic, but also I think if you're in California, it's still like a 6-hour flight to get to Hawaii, at least to Honolulu. So that's kind of that can be kind of difficult sometimes on the body, unless you're very young. If you're 21, 22, maybe it's not that big of a deal, but I'm not 21 or 22 anymore. And so some of the things I recognize a bit more. So you are in your husband, you are in a point where you think, hey, listen, things are happening around us. We're paying a lot to live here. You like what you're doing, but hey, listen, could we think about how much this same dollar would go somewhere else, right? I guess a couple of things run through my mind, right? Because I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, I'm a Midwest guy. I thought going to California was like a major thing. I didn't even think I would get to California when I was growing up, right? Which was like, I thought it was a whole nother world. So,
well, it kind of is.
I've seen 86 countries. So I was going to say, now I've seen 86 countries. So I have a different perspective on it, but yes, California is unique. I was just there not too long ago, actually visiting some friends. But the thing that I wanted to ask you though, is you'd mentioned you'd had this experience traveling around the world. You all were in a great salaried type of roles. And at the same time, you thought about doing something a bit differently. most people don't even get to the point to think about doing something differently, because when you're in a great job that pays you a lot of money, you just continue to do that day in, day out, because most people don't even make a lot of money.
Mhm.
So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about some of those external motivators that were not related to making money, and how that became more important than the actual income that you were generating.
Yeah, you touch on such a good point. It's actually more difficult to leave when things are just okay. And you reach a certain point, you're making enough money and everything's stable, and it's you're not in your 20s where you're just scrapping away to just keep the lights on. So we're at a different phase where things are much more comfortable. So it's more difficult to leave when things are comfortable. And it's you have to be driven by a sense of why outside of yourself. And for me, it was my children. I was adamant and have been from the beginning about them learning Spanish. And in the United States, there's 14 countries that have changed over where the majority language is Spanish. So they still speak English, but the majority language is Spanish. By the time my children are 30 years old, the entire 50 states will have changed where the majority of the population speaks Spanish. They will speak English too, but Spanish will be the majority language. And so where will my children be in all of that? Will they be able to compete? Will they be able to hear what everybody's saying around them? So that has always been a big driver, and it's been on my mind to have a full immersion experience and live in another country. And we identified a school here that's a beautiful international baccalaureate school in between the jungle and the sea. So they're getting an amazing education. There was that. And then also forget about the academics, but it's the expansive mindset that comes with travel. And showing my children, you don't need to slog along in the 9-to-5 corporate W-2 job for like your parents have for so long. There's another way. This is kind of a 1950s mindset where you buy a house, you live there, you retire, and you work your W-2 and you go to maybe Hawaii once a year for your vacation, and then you die. That sounds horrible to me. There's a whole nother way to do this. There's a set passive income for yourself. It's a live a life by design. You can, you can have location independence if you can set up the passive income for yourself. So these are the things I wanted to show my children. Make sure that you're able to speak another language. Watch how your parents have done this and left it all behind on passive and living on passive income from real estate. It's not that hard. And they can do this too.
Yeah, and so being able to really tap into in general is one thing, which is the why you're doing anything. And I know this, sometimes the why gets a bad rap because people say, well, yeah, but just why? But the reality is, no matter what type of investing you do, whether it's active investing, whether it's passive investing, there will be moments where things are challenging for everyone. And I repeat it ad nauseum to say that it's very important that you get clear on your why. Because when things, not if, when things get difficult, meaning you're a passive investor and the COVID-19 hits the world and you don't get any distributions for 2 years, well, you need to remember why you're doing what you're doing. Or you have a multifamily, maybe you start with a smaller multifamily and you have a $25,000, $30,000 roof damage that you should have figured out that it was going to be done. Don't ask why I'm actually using that specific example, but
it's one of those ask me how I know.
Yeah, exactly. Ask me how I know kind of thing. But when that happens, you have to be able to cling to the why. And so the fact that you are so tapped into your why really being around recognizing trends that are happening in the US. And I know you mentioned earlier 14 countries. I believe you were saying 14 states, but within those 14 states. And so so those 14 states, and then eventually will become 50 states. So being able to think about how you can also prepare your children, right, your why, for the future, number one. And then number two, really giving them that expansive mindset, something that you mentioned that you've had your whole life. You already globetrotted. You know what that did for you. You know how that helped you. And so you want to, in the same way, be able to provide that same or similar type of experience for your children. And so the thing that I really want the Going Along family to hear is that you're not even thinking about yourself. You're really thinking about your children in the future. And that is what is driven you and, your family to actually take action to move beyond the borders of the U.S. So one of the things, Becca, just really, really quickly, because I want to kind of get into a bunch of different things with you. But the thing that I love about what you're doing is that you are in a different place. I used to get exhausted explaining to people that, yes, I live in Barcelona, Spain, and 100% of the assets that I am purchasing or that my companies are purchasing is probably the better way to state it, are all in the United States, literally 9,000 kilometers away. Most of the assets, whether I was buying them actively or investing through someone else passively, I didn't actually see all of them. And so a lot of people were they couldn't believe it. Or most of the books that you read say, hey, listen, you've got to be the landlord and you've got to be able to get to your place. And so I'm not saying that you can't do that as a philosophy, but I just fundamentally believe that it's not the only way, because I've done 100% of the investment long distance, which is the whole genesis of today's conversation. And I'm always curious as to why someone else does it, because I know that there are a lot more of us out there than people will tend to believe. So would you please share with us what gave you the audacity to actually decide to invest long distance the first time, and then beyond that, to continue to invest long distance? And whether that's active or passive, I just want people to be inspired by things that you have also done.
Sure. Well, it began with looking at what's in my local area, and that didn't look very good. Things are very expensive in California with small returns. So I dabbled myself into a 12-unit Kansas City by myself. I was the lone wolf out there. And these smaller properties like this, you could, on the books, it looks like it cash flows until one tenant moves out, or until a roof goes out, or until a water heater. And, the profit margin on those deals are just so small that, it blows out your cash flow for 6 months. So that was my first venture on my own. And I thought, okay, this is a good first step. That was my training ground. I learned so much on that property. It's seminars, as I hear other people call them, that, you always have one property like that. And then I realized, there's far greater returns to be had at a larger scale. And the economies of scale kick in at about 50 units or so, that you could put in professional management. You're not as affected by one tenant moving out, or even two tenants moving out, or small repairs. And those properties, just on a per door basis and the returns you can get, sent me outside of California to do that. And then once I'm outside of California, well, who cares where you live? You can live in Barcelona, Spain. You can live in Costa Rica, as long as you have your team on the ground. And that's the difference in multifamily real estate, which is what we do here. It's a team sport. So you have your boots on the ground. You have, the person that finds the deals, that puts it together, that negotiates the contract, and then the property manager is working on it. Then you have the money people that come in. There's so many different players in this, that you can absolutely be location independent and do this business with tremendous returns, better returns than I would get investing in California, or even being a lone wolf out there in Kansas City.
Yeah, and so this is one of my favorite things that I like to constantly repeat is #teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah.
And because ultimately it does, especially when you're talking about the long distance investing. But you talked about, so you were already in California, you were in a place, so that specific location where you were, Northern California in the Bay Area, made it difficult to create cash flow. It seems like cash flow was something that was important to you from an investment perspective. I'm making an assumption, but I would love a confirmation or.
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah. And
perfect.
You have different goals. We're at the phase that we left the job, so we need the cash flow. We're not at the retirement phase where I could invest now for appreciation. Like, we invest for appreciation too, but the main goal is cash flow.
Okay, perfect. Which makes a lot of sense. So I'm glad that you also help people to provide some context. And that's one of the things that is very, very useful. But you mentioned that so how did Kansas City, that 12 unit, come up? So you were actually living in California at the time?
I was living in California, and then I realized I need to invest out of here because the returns are so poor.
Okay, so the returns were so poor. So were you investing in California, or were you just looking and decided this doesn't make sense?
No, I invested in California. So my first project was, and I always recommend people do this, by the way. It was, they call it house hacking now. And I bought a duplex in San Francisco. And I should have known, it was only myself and a contractor that bid on it. I thought, this is not going to end well.
Yeah. But you don't know what you don't know in the beginning.
You don't know what you don't. And it's turned out just fine, actually. I lived in one unit and renovated the downstairs, and then lived in the other unit and renovated the upstairs. And good old Victorian building. I lifted up the building and put a garage underneath in San Francisco, as we do, and charged another $500 for rent, and blew out the backside and rented everything. And oh my gosh, it was so much work. I would never do that again, but I'm glad I did it. So that property's still humming along. We still have that today. And then I thought, okay, there's got to be an easier way. Let's take the next step. I'm going to take this out of state, and I can get more units for much less of a price. But then I was the lone wolf out there, in another state, and, a smaller deal. It just didn't make sense. So it's been a growth process. And then from there, I went on to passive investing, putting my own money in other deals. We have 450 passive units now, many of them in Texas. And this is myself investing my IRA money and some of just money that I've taken out of the stock market into other people's deals. So I invest both passively in others and actively for myself.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense, at least for me. When you look at, there are so many different vehicles that can get you to whatever your destination is. Some of those vehicles you are actually driving yourself. Sometimes you're a passenger on, whether it's a plane or a train or an automobile. It doesn't matter what it is, but there are a lot of different tools. Trusting that you're enjoying today's conversation. And you know what? If you're tired of getting crushed by taxes and you're looking for greater freedom to be able to choose what you want to do when you want to do it, make sure that you go to firstgencp.com/going long and see how we can help you today. Let's get back to the conversation. What I think is really interesting here is to come back and say, hey, listen, and as I said before, I don't believe that you can't invest locally. However, I love your story, Becca, because you did it locally, and then you decided, hey, listen, even after doing it locally and having this experience, and it's an experience that's continued, right, even to today, which I think is fantastic. But you've also said, hey, listen, I need to go somewhere else. Because many times people they'll go, you know what, man, these returns are terrible, but I can't really do anything else, or it's good enough, but they don't think to go beyond or to have that expansive mindset like you talked about before. What were some of the feelings that you had when you initially thought, oh my gosh, I want to get more yield, or you want to get whatever more that benefit was, but you realized that you were going to have to go from, I don't even know what that is. What would that be, like a 24-hour drive from the Bay Area to Kansas City?
Oh yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine. I flew there each time. And the deal really didn't go that well. When it was cash flowing, everything was fine. But then, as I said, when one little thing went wrong, it went up in smoke. One thing, though, I hold to is investing in emerging markets. And so as long as you have the population growth, the growth in rental income, diversity of income, people coming into these areas, you have a lot of room to make mistakes. All boats rise with the rising tide. So on that deal in particular, even though I made so many mistakes, I still sold it for 20% over what I bought it for in 3 years. And it's not because of my brilliance. It's just the market kept going up. So from that, I took, okay, I've got something here. It's the emerging markets. I used to be in the RE Mentor program, and they really preach this a lot. Follow these emerging markets. And so I said, okay, we're going to do more than a 12 unit, and we're going to follow this emerging market path. I'm going to dabble in the passive part of things and watch how this goes. But it was a big mindset shift to continue to move out of my money out of state. And when my Kansas City deal, wasn't working out, my parents said, I told you so. Keep your money in California. It's safe here. Yes, it's very dysfunctional, but it continues to appreciate. And they said, we knew it. We knew it. You'd lose all your money, going out of state. Well, I said, nope, guys, I learned a lot. What I need to do is do it differently and go bigger and go to a different state. And they said, oh, this child will never learn. She's so misled.
So there, but and there's a lot for us to draw from, because you had a first experience that was going okay in California. You decided you want to go somewhere else. It didn't seem like it was giving you the type of return that you were looking for, either in financially or in time, because you were spending more time out there. The thing that is so key for everyone to understand, it is about the mindset, Becca, that you are talking about. It is the mindset, because you could have listened to all of the naysayers, and whether they were friends or family, it doesn't really matter. And you could have said, look, yeah, you know what, I made a mistake, and you could have crumbled and you could have gone back. But rather than that, you said, hey, listen, what I can do better next time is go even bigger, go to another type of a location. And so maybe you can talk to that person who is the passive investor today, and that they're loving their busy job. Like I did 26 years in the corporate life until recently. And I was in the enterprise software space. And that's a lot of the people that are listening and watching us are in that same space. And there's this thought of, hey, listen, I like my job. I'm making a lot of money, quote unquote. And at the same time, this whole passive investing thing sounds good, but I don't necessarily know if I'm going to have much control over this. So most people that are in these types of roles or have a lot of control. So what do you say to that person that is interested? They're thinking about, okay, I could makes sense what Becca's saying to invest beyond my backyard, but I actually need more control.
Right. I can speak exactly to that, because I thought the same thing as a bit of a do-it-yourselfer with my, city property. And just, this is, I don't know, our family is such do-it-yourselfers. I don't know why we've,
it's just in the genes, I guess.
It's just in the genes. I mean, from the smallest thing. And I thought the same thing. Oh no, passive investing out of state, I'm going to lose control. I won't have any control. Well, wait a minute. That's what we want, don't we? I mean, we want to let off the wheel a little bit. And as long as I do my due diligence and invest with the right people, or find someone like myself and yourself that can vet these deals for me. So that was the change of also mindset, is that, one, I don't want to have control. And two, you need to find somebody who can vet these for you, that look at every deal, make sure the financials are correct, make sure that the market is good, the class of property is good, that the rent projections are not at the peak of all the other rents in the area, that it's somewhere in between, it's conservative. So I would say to a passive investor just starting out, find someone like yourself or myself that can help you, that is investing side by side with you and can help place your money into these deals.
I think no, go right ahead. Keep going.
I'm sorry. And then in just backing up a bit on the naysayers. So in going into passive investing, your friends and family, they love you. They want to protect you. They don't mean any harm, but they'll say, oh, you're going to lose your money out of state. Who are these people? You don't know. But this is what I tell my children is, when you want to do something, don't ask your parents. We don't know. My daughter wants to be an actress. I know nothing about that. You go out and seek the people that have done what you want to do. Ask them how they got there. Ask them what they would do differently to shortcut your journey.
So being able to collapse timeframes is something that's key from someone who's already done it, not just said that they've done it. I think that's really important. And you talked about the vetting process. That's something that's absolutely key. Now, you just mentioned something. We have I have a very tight-knit group of investors. And it's interesting because one of the investors recently, we were having a conversation and said, hey, look, sometimes people are like, hey, you've invested with, you've done this through Billy's company back in, but this guy is living over in Spain, right? He's living over in Barcelona. And in the conversation recently, the conversation went in that way. And sometimes, and I'd love to get your take on this, right? Because you're in Costa Rica. But when people are investing with you through your own syndication, you're bringing people together, and you happen to live overseas. What do you say to that person? I'll save the end of this story for just a second, but what do you say to that person when you have someone who is interested in being able to invest with you through your syndication, you're bringing people together, but you're no longer living in the United States?
Right. I would say, even if I live next door to the property, I'm not managing this anyway. This is the property manager. We're managing the business plan and making sure the property manager is following through with that. We're managing the contractors. We're managing the financials. It doesn't matter where we are. We're checking on the property, paying visits to the property. We often have a person that lives in that area to go by and make sure things are going okay, and managing the project manager. So I would say it doesn't matter a bit. It's such a team sport, and there's so many people involved. It doesn't matter where you and I are.
Yeah, well, I have a very similar type of a thought process, right? Because at the end of the day, you and your teams, you're managing certain different processes. I used to work in business process, so my mind thinks like that anyway. So we're managing certain business processes. We are responsible for developing relationships, and those are usually with our partners, with our investors, things like that. But he said, well, what should I tell them? I said, well, you don't tell them anything. If someone's not comfortable with the fact that you're living somewhere, then we're not here to convince anyone. You're here to explain what is your role in the entire process. I said, but you can also help. You could probably show them your tax returns and those checks that you keep getting. That would probably help them. Which was just kind of we kind of laughed about it, but it is true. And I wanted to just get your perspective from that, because when you are overseas, sometimes I went through this. I had this imposter syndrome thing where I was trying to figure out, I've got to come up with a real excuse or a reason why I'm like, you know what? No, that's part of the beauty. I can live wherever I want to live in the world, as long as, and you touched on it earlier, Becca, it's so important, the team, because it's just like for those people that are in corporate life, you, even as a high performing medical rep or medical sales device rep, you didn't do things on your own.
No.
You worked with your team. I mean, I did things in my corporate life, but I was maybe the face of the team, but I actually led and orchestrated the team. It's no different now. And so getting your perspective in that, having that alignment is really interesting. One of the other things that because I don't get a chance to ask that many questions like this, but are you also working with investors that are outside of the US, or is it primarily in the US?
A couple outside of the U.S., many right here in our town that are from Australia and England, but mostly they're U.S., I would say.
Okay, so and with that, when you're thinking about helping people, because I know one of the things that also usually comes up is people think about, well, hang on a second, you've got these different currencies, and you're doing this and you're doing that. It's just a topic for those of us who are global citizens, right? What do you say to that person that's interested in understanding? Okay, well, tell me about the currency and the currency issues that could arise.
Oh, I'm sorry. So your question was in respect to the change in value of the currency and investing in the U.S.?
Exactly. Because it's one of those things that we can't control, right?
Right. Okay.
And so maybe someone says, yeah, but this looks great, but I don't know, the colon is doing something today, and tomorrow it's going to be doing something completely different.
Well, in times of flux, many people put their money into hard assets, into things that you can see, feel, touch, and multifamily is that, and real estate is that. So I would say to that's a safe place for it to be. And then you're orchestrating a business plan that takes usually about 3 years. We look for a 3 to 5 year hold. So you need not worry now about what things are going to be in 3 to 5 years. It's nothing you can do.
Yeah, there's definitely that is that. And so I'm glad you're talking to that, because one of the things is when you are, at a certain point, every single investment that exists on earth has risk associated with it. And one of the things that is also important is, yes, whenever it's a hard asset that is generating cash flow, that's always something that's a positive thing, because you're not waiting forever. You are getting votes of confidence shortly over time. The business plan may be 3 years or 5 years. It could even be 10 years. But along the way, when executed properly, the business plan should be giving you these votes of confidence. So you will start to see very quickly, relatively speaking, whether or not whether or not the business plan is being orchestrated properly. But it's this notion that just because it's a hard asset, there's no risk. There's a risk related to everything. People blindly place their money in the stock market week after week. And there's massive risk associated with that, right? I mean, you watch the different, I don't know, I say Wall Street, but watch Wall Street or any of the other markets, and you start to see the paper assets. You're blindly placing money week after week or month after month or every 2 weeks. And there's risk associated with that. So also being able to keep things into perspective, And if it's the type of risk that you are comfortable accepting and or understanding, which is really important,
Yes.
then you're making a much more informed decision.
Absolutely. And in respect to even the stock market versus hard assets is, Apple Computer, I have no idea what their business plan is to drive more sales, but I know exactly what the business plan is with multifamily. So you're able to understand it. You're okay. We're fixing the units. We're raising the rents. We're cutting expenses. As most of your listeners know, multifamily is based on unlike single family, it's based on the value of the rents or value of the income. So if you can increase the income by lowering the expenses or raising the rents, you made $1 million. Well, what Apple Computer does with my stock, I have no idea. I have no control. And it's very hard to follow along in what they're doing with my money.
Yeah.
So I am really big on investing in things you understand. Yeah. And real estate's pretty easy to understand.
Yes, I think it is. It is. It's one of those things that's simple enough. You say, hey, listen, people need to live somewhere. There's rent that comes in, that rent. Then you've got to make sure that things are maintained and repaired, and you probably have to pay some taxes, and you have to make sure you have it insured. And so those things come out as operating expenses, which get you to your net operating income. Then if you have some debt, which you probably need to have some debt on that, right? Is once you pay that off, then everything else is what you get to distribute to your investors and for yourself. So
that's right. And then even on that, Billy, even if you add that with an emerging market as the rising tide and population growth, rent growth, and a diversity of income, these areas are rising, even if you sat around and didn't do much. So imagine putting in a value add into this where you're bringing up the rents and lowering expenses also with a rising market. There's risk. I mean, it's not a gravy train. There's risk, but it's risk that we can anticipate and account for.
Exactly. And I was taught this thing the other day. It said, as someone who is in the sales profession, which I personally think sales profession is one of the best professions that exist when executed properly, it says our role is to make sure that it's not to get a client to buy, it's to help them make a more informed decision. Yes. And so when you're able to provide the inputs, respond to the questions, then you are providing the potential client with what they need to make the most informed decision for themselves. Yes. And sometimes that is with the solution that you have. And more often than not, it's not. So that it is what it is. But we are here to help give and provide information, data. But listen, before we go into the going long final three, Becca, there is one thing, because I know you've mentioned it a couple times. I know you talked about the emerging markets, but everyone has a choice in the different types of hard assets. You have really found that your sweet spot is multifamily. It sounds like larger multifamily. So can you maybe talk to that person who's really wanting to understand just a bit more? And you've kind of peppered things around, which is great. But why is it that larger multifamily is where you see the largest benefit for others as well as for yourself?
First, I would say most people understand multifamily. They've lived in an apartment as a young person, or they have friends that live in an apartment. So on that respect, I feel that they understand it or are familiar with it. The second is knowing a bit about the housing crisis. So there's over 5 million units. We're 5 million units short in the U.S. So we're in desperate need of new housing because of all these new families that have formed. So the demand is tremendous. Also, it's more recession resistant than other assets. And you can look at the data on this, but even in the 2007-8 crisis, where single family homes tanked, multifamily had a very low default rate. And these are much more stable assets in that sense because you have economies of scale, as we started to talk about before at the beginning. So it's the demand, the understanding of the asset, the economies of scale, the low default rate. Also, the fact that these markets, the rising emerging markets, that we can benefit from that. There will always be a demand for more housing, as I don't see that there's always going to be a demand for maybe, retail strip malls. as Amazon continues to grow. But people will always need a place to live. They'll need a house over their head. Also, in the priority of things that they will pay, first of all, they're going to pay their housing. Housing and food will always be an essential. And for that reason, I really believe in multifamily. Another fun thing we've been doing, Billy, that I hadn't mentioned before, but to address this housing crisis, we have taken a hotel in Arizona, and it's a 100-unit Quality Inn motel that we're taking down to 65 units of multifamily housing. And this is a tertiary market in Arizona that is in desperate need of housing. And a big part of that lack of housing is in the lower middle class and the upper lower class, in the $700 to $1,000 per rent area. In that spot, there are people living in hotels looking for housing. So we've taken this hotel and provided all new beautiful housing for these people at a fraction of the cost. So, we got this deal at 30 cents on the dollar in the hotel apocalypse. And so there's ways to do good in this also, which is another thing I love about this business. You're providing clean, affordable, safe housing for people. You're having an environmental impact in that we're putting in water, water rationing things, low flow toilets, low flow, everything that is possible there to lessen the water. So there's the social benefit as well as the financial benefit of having great returns for our investors.
Well, and this is one of the things that really helps us to understand you have a specific type of asset that you are focused on, and for some of the many reasons that you talked about, the demand, and you're talking about just the fact that not only do people need to live in a place, that more importantly, they want to live somewhere, and you want to sleep in an area where that you are warm in the winter and you are cool in the summer, and being able to do that in a place where you feel safe is also something that's absolutely critical and key. And then one of the things that you mentioned now, also, Becca, when you can understand that you can take your knowledge and your team's knowledge and be able to transform something like a hotel, provide that for housing, and be able to also do good at the same time that you are generating profit, is music, and can be music to investors' ears. So, and I know you're going to tell us in just a couple seconds how we can find out more about that. I know you've gotten a special ebook and stuff like that we're going to tell everybody. So you got to hang on just a couple seconds, everybody. And she's going to tell you exactly how you can find out more about even getting in touch with her and find out more about some of these projects. But Becca, we've got to get into the Going Long Final Three. And the thing is, you're our special guest, and I never ask any of our special guests the Going Long Final Three unless you tell me that you're ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I knew that was going to be the answer. There was no doubt.
And all my tropical birds in the background are ready.
No,
let's go, guys.
Yeah, we're good. So listen, we started with you over in Guanacaste, in the region, Guanacaste region in Costa Rica. I'd like to bring things over here to Europe, because that's just what we do in the Going Long Final Three. And the thing is, with question number one, the Going Long Final Three, we'd love for you to share with me and the Going Long family, what is your favorite European city that you have either visited or is still on your bucket list to visit?
Oh boy, this is such a tough question. I was a college backpacker through Europe in the youth hostels, me and all the Australians you see there. So about youth hostels, you always have 50% Australian backpackers. It's so cool. I love it.
Yes.
Oh, but of everything, I just love Italy. I did a study abroad in England, but and that's a special place in my heart. But Italy, I think Florence, Italy would probably be my top.
Well, we'll take Florence. Firenze is a wonderful place, wonderful place, and year round. So it's awesome. So we'll go with that. I
do love the Run of the Bulls in Pamplona, though. That was really fun. So
and I think it's happening around this time, I believe. Actually, it could be. Well, yeah, it's happening in just a couple of days. So fun. Anyway, so that's question number one. So we're going to go with Florence. And we're going to go to question number two, which actually has a lot to do with the exposure, I guess I would say, that I've had with people that are very, very successful. And today, and especially because you're like living overseas doing this whole long distance thing, I just think it's awesome. You are absolutely someone who is a successful person. You're positively impacting other people's lives, which is fantastic. And so hopefully you're going to agree with me, Becca, that when you watch successful people go out and accomplish things, one of the things that separates really successful people apart from everybody else is that they, unlike most people, when they put a plan together, they go out, they execute the plan, they get things right from the very first day. Like every single thing that they do, they get it right. And because of that, they're able to go much faster and accelerate over. Did I just say that? I think I did, but that's okay. That's okay. It's just a joke. Becca's looking at me like, what in the world just happened?
You're fine. You're fine. Just keep going.
No, yeah, exactly. So everybody, if you're not watching the video version, like today's literally one of you have to see the video version because I think she was just like embarrassed for me. No. So it's just kind of it's an inside joke with me and the Going Along family. The thing is, I just like to have fun as well as educate. But one of the things, nobody gets things right the first time, every time.
Nobody.
Especially successful people. Like one of the things with successful people, Becca, and hopefully like that was a joke before, but that you'll agree, like really successful people get things wrong like 20 to 50 times more than everybody else. Like 20 to 50 times more, right? But the thing is that they do something differently. And this is no joke. They do one thing very, very differently than everybody else. And that is every single time that there is a relevant mistake or learning opportunity, or call it whatever you want, but things didn't go like the way they were supposed to. Whenever it's relevant, every single time they stop, they learn from the mistake, and then right away they put different strategies, tactics, and actions in place to minimize the probability of that exact same thing happening again.
Yep.
So if you can think about think about it, but don't dwell on it. Like what was the mistake? What was the learning opportunity? Call it however you want to call it. But most importantly, what is the one lesson that you know that you have to share with us today so that we can minimize the probability of the exact same thing happening?
The one lesson is my biggest takeaway in real estate, I would say, is the power of a team. Pivoting quickly when things don't go right, and they won't go right all the time. But just the team is 10 times more powerful than the individual.
Awesome. Team is more powerful. So go ahead.
Far more powerful, and pivoting from your mistakes. Just don't keep making the same mistakes. Don't buy another unit in 12 unit in Kansas City down the street thinking I bought on the wrong block. No. Take all those mistakes and learn from them. Embrace the team spirit. It's so much more powerful, and scale up.
All right. Awesome.
And put it on autopilot. I'm a big fan of how this whole thing started, right? Lifestyle independence. Put things on autopilot as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's
fantastic.
The team right there.
Fantastic. So the power of the team, not having fear of pivoting, and being able to learn from those learning opportunities and mistakes and move forward. So here's the Going Along final three, question number 3. And it really has to do with helping to feed our minds with knowledge, Becca, before we kind of wrap things up. So what is the one book that you would recommend to the Going Along family today?
Well, it's in the spirit of teamwork. It's Who Not How, my absolute favorite book. It has been a game changer for me. And this is a book that talks about, outsourcing to some degree. Yep. But it says the premise is, you can take something from the 0 to 80% pretty easily. It's all in your head. You just regurgitate everything in your head on paper. Taking things from the 80 to 90% is hard. Yep. Taking things from the 90 to 100% is like climbing a mountain. Yep. So the thing to do is outsource it from the 80% on and send it off to people that can do this better than you, and move on to your next idea.
Love it. Dan Sullivan, Who Not How. We'll definitely make sure that we include that in the show notes as well. And Becca, you know what? I cannot believe how fast these come. Like literally, I'm flabbergasted. And I'm like all calm because I'm listening to these birds in the background and chirping and cool. And I'm getting the educational points from you. And I'm thinking about you from the very beginning. You're talking about you and your husband, CT, MRI scanner in the medical devices area. You had a chance also, one of the two of you were even had the Hawaiian territory, which is really kind of cool, and probably a lot of flying as well. You started recognizing a lot of the things that were happening from demographics. You thought about the way that you also had this globetrotter mentality. So you wanted to have a place for your sons to be make sure that they were also aware of what was happening in the US, also expand their mind by being able to live abroad and open their mind to new things, new way of perceiving the world, situations. And you recognize that, hey, listen, those dollars that you were spending up in the Bay Area, they could probably go much further living somewhere else. And so you were able to combine all of these different elements together, which is allowing you and your family, in spite of what was going on in COVID, to make the leap. To living in another country, to being able to not only live in another country, but also continue to maintain and expand the lifestyle that you had already created for yourself. Thanks to a lot of the investment decisions, either actively or passively, that you are making, that income that is coming in today is one of the main reasons that you continue to be where you are. And along the way, you've also been helping other people along that path. And so everybody's just thinking to themselves, Billy, just be quiet and ask her the question. So I'm going to ask you the question. How can every single person get in touch with you, understand exactly what's going on with you, also what's happening with Hint Investments, and find out more about you? Help us understand. What's the best way?
You bet. The easiest way is to probably download my guide to help your audience here. It's called 6 Steps to Put Your Income on Autopilot and Move Overseas. And you can find that at www.hintinvestments.com, hintinvestments.com. And this, for those of you inspiring travelers that want to leave it all behind, or people that just kind of want to straddle 2 lives, in 2 countries and live on passive income, this is a great guide for you. It provides the best places to live in 2022 for expats. It gives you a cost of living guide. It takes you through our journey and how we really just stitched everything together. And this is what it is. This is lots of income streams stitched together to make this happen. So that guide will be perfect for you. You can also reach me at becca@hintinvestments.com and reach out. Travel and real estate are my 2 favorite subjects. So please, if you have any questions or need any coaching or guidance in this journey, I'd be happy to help.
All right, fantastic. So we're going to make it really easy for everyone. So if you're running on the treadmill, if you're cooking, if you're freaking out, don't worry. We're just going to make it really simple for you. Just click the link. You'll be able to go directly to the guide she's talking about and or send her an email. So we like to keep things very simple here. So Becca,
very easy.
Listen, thank you so very much for deciding to invest your time with me and the entire Going Long family. Really, really appreciate you investing your time with us today.
Oh, Billy, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. It's very refreshing to speak with other travelers, international people, and fellow investors. So I've loved the conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity for the time today.
All right, fantastic. So with that, if you give me just like 10 or 15 seconds, Becca, and then we'll be out of here. Listen, Going Long family, Becca just gave you so many from the strategy ideas that you can do. She and her family have actually made the move outside of the US to live in another place, continuing to maintain lifestyle. So many nuggets that she shared. Vetting teams, understanding more about emerging markets, finding out more about syndications, and also being able to vet your sponsors. So listen, take today's conversation, share it with family and friends, get together, have a conversation, have a coffee, have a beverage, whatever, but just talk about today's conversation so you can move more from the theory to the real deal and being able to put this knowledge into practice. Becca's even given herself her contact information. So reach out to her, take advantage of that. And while you're doing all that, I'll be here preparing the next conversation. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much. Trust that you enjoyed today's conversation. And once again, today's conversation was sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners. If you're an accredited investor and want to find out more about how we're helping accredited investors to gain their personal freedom even faster, go to firstgencp.com/going long.